Hello and welcome to With Great Cloud Comes Great Responsibility, how to fully protect your data in AWS. Today's event is sponsored by Rubrik and Amazon Web Services and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Keith Ward. I'm with Actual Tech Media and I'm excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's session, we do have a few things you need to know that will help you get the most out of this event. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in the event control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where our speakers will tackle some of your top questions. That Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, and slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, let us know in the Q&A and we'll be happy to help you out. Second, in the handout section of your event control panel, you'll find numerous important resources, including information from both Rubrik and Amazon Web Services. Third, at the end of this event, we'll be giving away a pair of Beats Studio wireless headphones. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for this prize. The official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handouts section. Scroll to the bottom and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. And finally, one of the best things about this event is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenters. To help encourage your questions, we have a special additional prize for you. That's a $50 Amazon gift card for the best question. At the end of the event, we'll look at all the questions, pick out the one we think is best, and contact that prize winner. And with that, let's get to today's content. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our participants today. Hosting the discussion will be Natasha Loeffler-Little, Principal Product Manager with Rubrik. And joining Natasha are Damani Norman, Tech Lead for Cloud Native with Rubrik, and Jake Burns, an Enterprise Strategist with Amazon Web Services. Natasha, the ball's in your court. Take it away.
Welcome, Jake and Damani. How are you guys doing today?
Good. How are you?
Doing great.
Good. Well, welcome everyone to our webinar here today, talking about with great cloud comes great responsibility. And we're going to go ahead and dive in. Super excited about this joint webinar with Rubrik and AWS together. Again, thank you, Jake, for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
Let's go ahead. Yeah. What we're going to talk about today, we've got a pretty fun action-packed agenda. And really starting with sort of a Top Gun type taking a 30,000 foot view, talking a little bit beyond that about the themes that having that 30,000 foot view can translate into the problems that we're seeing with data security today. We're not just going to cover data, we're also going to talk about the real world conversations that are happening and the things that Jake and Damani have had real life experience talking through with customers, how to take that into pragmatic approaches with securing your data, what the best way to do that in the cloud is, and then really how you can take a couple things away today to drive a consistent experience across your cloud environments, right? So I, promised you a Top Gun type start. And in that, I have a fun fact about both Jake and Damani. They're both pilots. And I have to ask, are you guys, were you professional pilots or was this a passion project?
So in my case, I'm a private pilot. I have an instrument rating, but, I just fly personally. I actually use my airplane to commute to a lot of my different work locations. So that's an interesting point there. But just a private pilot. Me, my friends, and my
very
family
cool.
Around.
I wouldn't say just. That's pretty awesome.
Damani actually outranks me. I don't have an instrument rating. I took the training for it. I never actually completed it. I switched to helicopter. So that kind of distracted me. But I'm a private pilot as well. Basically, what that means is the FAA trusts me to take passengers, but they don't trust me enough to charge them money. So not a commercial pilot.
Fabulous. Well, I would say you have credentials above and beyond the average citizen, and there are some really interesting principles that you two have taken with you into cloud and cloud data security that I'd like you to share with everyone else. Let's go ahead and start with you, Jake. What are some of the things that you know are true as a pilot and in cloud data security?
Yeah, so I was in IT for a long time before I started pilot training. I think if I started pilot training earlier in my career, I would have been better at IT, to be honest with you. There's so many, I mean, we all know that, and we all hear that flying is the safest form of travel, but very few people understand why. And I attribute majority of it, and there's a lot of, credit to go around, but the way that pilots, the attitudes that pilots have and the training that pilots have contribute to a large degree to that level of safety. So there's, for example, there's a concept of pilot in command, which is essentially like for every flight, no matter how many pilots there are, one person is accountable for the safety of that flight. A very interesting thing about that, though, is they also have the authority and beyond the instructions that they're given by traffic controllers, beyond anything, they have final authority to make decisions for the safety of that flight. So this is, I think, something that I see in IT that we get wrong. We have people who are accountable that don't have the authority, and we have people who have authority that aren't accountable. And, having that kind of a balance, I think, is one of the reasons why why aviation is so safe. I mean, there's so many other things. I mean, checklists are another one. Pilots use checklists for every single thing. You could have done a flight 1,000 times in the same way. If you're a good pilot, you're still going to use that checklist to check the fuel again, check all the nuts and bolts and everything on the airplane before every single flight. So if there is a problem, you'll find it. And I think that's another lesson that other professions could adopt and improve their excellence.
Yeah, I agree. I like that. Damani, how about you?
Similar. I mean, all the things that Jake said. What I would add to that, though, is communication is also key. So while pilot command has the ultimate authority over the aircraft, the individual operators, if you have a co-pilot, if you're on an airline with the stewards and things, they have their own role to play, right? They have their authority to operate within their scope of duties, and then but they need to communicate what they're doing, right? Hey, we took this action. Here's the result. So that pilot in command, or in a business sense, executive staff knows what's happening within their environment in real time as things are happening, and can provide feedback back and forth. Right? You look at some of the failures that the aviation industry has had is because of lack of communication. Co-pilot saw something, was depending on the captain to take care of it. When if the co-pilot had spoken up, whatever the event was wouldn't have happened. Same thing in IT, right? IT operator maybe sees something, or even a user in the environment sees something and doesn't take action, doesn't tell anybody about it, becomes a bigger and a bigger problem. But if that stuff is reported up, it's communicated, then everybody knows what's going on, and everybody can take the steps that are necessary to resolve those issues.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think I understand too, communication has sort of a certain order when you're in those situations. It's real tight, right? It almost has its own form of a checklist that you communicate back and forth with each other.
Yeah, there's definitely a rank or a pattern, if you will, who you communicate what to and when. If you're talking to an air controller, for example, versus talking to your co-pilot, or even how you're communicating with your passengers, there's ways to do all of that. Same thing in IT, right? We have these reporting mechanisms, or you should have in your environment these reporting mechanisms, so that information can go up the chain and it can come back down the chain, and everybody in between is getting informed about what the issue or what the thing is that needs to be addressed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so many parallels here. All right. And Jake, did you have one more thing to add?
Yeah, definitely. Most people probably don't realize that the vast majority of your training, and this is more true in helicopter than in airplane, but it's true in both, is practicing for emergencies. And these are emergencies that are probably never going to happen, like the plane is on fire, or the engine fails, or you have a full electrical failure. If we had more time, I could tell you about the time that actually did happen to me while I was a student pilot flying solo, but maybe that's a story.
I would love to hear about that. And, I was going to say this exact same thing is, the number of hours that you had to put in to becoming a pilot, not just minimum hours, but the number of hours to become a good pilot, to become a safe pilot, to keep going with that. This is very, very similar to some of the practices we want to continue to talk about with cloud and data security of practice, 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 right?
Oh, yes.
Some of these things.
Oh, practice. And, flying an airplane is, especially if it's a hobby, it's not it can be expensive. Those hours do add up. But you really need to be current. You can't, I haven't flown in a couple of years. I wouldn't go up without taking, a number of lessons to get current again. Right. So you're constantly flying with flight instructors, always staying current. And, another thing that I think IT could take a lesson from aviation is the use of simulators. It's a lot less expensive. It's not quite the same thing, but you can practice procedures and develop muscle memory and good habits by using simulators.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're going to talk about that muscle memory, right? And as it relates to IT, an event happens, it's not something that happens to you every day, but you have that muscle memory to know, okay, I know how to handle this, or we know where to go to look for the procedure on how to handle this. So in the cockpit, you don't want to be freaking out, throwing up your hands and just not doing anything, right? You need to have some action that you can take to continue to control the situation. Same thing in IT. An event happens, okay, we know we've practiced for this, we've trained for this, we know where to go to get the exact procedure of what we need to do. Maybe we don't know every step right off the top of our head, but we know where to start and how to continue. And you don't end up in this vapor lock situation. So.
Yeah. I mean, this is a perfect segue into the next topic, really talking about data security as a problem. And Damani, I'd love to hear you talk about this, because one of the things is that it's not happening every day to you per se, but to you as an organization, anyone who's listening here. But the prevalence of this and the likelihood that it's going to happen to you is pretty high. So can you go ahead and break down some of the stats and where we're at with our perspective of what's going on with data security?
Yeah. So, the prevalence of this is threats are out there and they're getting more and more common. They're not getting less common. Many organizations are still not very confident in how they're going to respond to these threats. They haven't, again, practiced for them. They haven't prepared enough for them. So when a threat does happen, or an event does happen, then they're sort of left in a position of trying to figure out on the fly what to do. So we've seen, we did a survey through our Zero Labs organization. 98% of the organizations that responded to our survey said, hey, we've had an event that has reached our senior levels, right? Our CEO, our CIO, VPs, they all know that, we had a cyber attack event or we had some sort of event in our environment, whether it be small or large, something happened and it rose to that level. 92% of our IT leaders are concerned they're not going to be able to recover from an event, right? Because it hasn't happened to them yet, or they've read some of these other things that are going on in the world today, and they see other organizations struggling with it, and they just don't have the confidence within their organization that they can recover from an event. So again, that's where that practice, that preparation builds that confidence, and that's what we're here to kind of help with. And then we also found that 11% of respondents said that they hadn't adequately addressed their environment. They know they have vulnerabilities, but they just haven't either figured out the tools or been able to invest the time or the money into shoring up their environment. So, a preponderance of the people who responded to this said, yes, we're concerned about what's happening in the environment.
Yeah. And, the statement there is like, this is a pretty big problem. Not everyone feels prepared to deal with it, right? And it does have a toll. I'll let you talk through some of these stats as well, and I have a couple comments and questions for you.
Sure. So again, through that same survey, there's not just hey, we have an event, we need to respond to this, but it takes a toll on the people, your reputation, the company's reputation, the trust that your customers or partners within your organization have with you, right? So of the people who had a security event, 96% of them reported one or more of these types of responses or issues with that event that happened. So 41% were saying, hey, we had negative press happen. It got out to the media that we had an event, or we had to make an announcement because of the type of company that they are. And so that resulted in having to deal with the media coverage, having to respond to that. 42% reported loss in customers, right? Nobody wants that, right? Especially because of something that really shouldn't have been your fault. You were attacked by someone, and now you're losing customers because of that, and that's just not fair. Lost revenue, same thing. You lose customers, you're losing revenue, and nobody again wants that. 36% of customers reported a leadership change. So you have one of these events happen, and your mid-level or even high-level managers are getting replaced because somebody has to be held accountable. And then again, 5% of them reported a negative stock impact. So again, revenue and overall health of the company. And some companies don't bounce back from that, right? They take that hit and they stay down. They don't come back.
Yeah. So before we pause and go into some of the things that we've looked at Rubrik, and then we'll have Jake share some stories from the AWS side, taking this pretty seriously is like the big call to action here, right? We could look at the numbers, and again, it's easy to say that what has not happened to me yet, or it could possibly happen to me. I mean, the impact to, like you said, mid and upper level management can be very personal. The impact to the brand, to the revenue streams for the company, to the stock or the value of the company. These are really, really big, wide sweeping problems and impact that any kind of cybercrime can have on your business. So, the rest of what we're going to talk about here today is now going to be talking specifically about taking some of those core principles that you guys have from your experiences being pilots into, like, how do you take these numbers and how do we take this concern and this fear and personalize it and help you take some things that could help you, have different conversations with your team today, look for other ways to be prepared, and start practicing and creating your own checklists to make a difference. Before we go into that, Jake, do you have anything to add about like how you've seen these numbers play out on your side?
Yeah, I mean, obviously most customers are not going to want to publish these things. So we get these in aggregate for the most part, right? And it's something but we do talk about a lot in one-on-one private conversations with customers. And so the thing about security that I've noticed is it's kind of like the least important thing until it's the most important thing. And what I mean by that is, when there's a security event, either within an organization, your own organization, or within your industry, or just even in the news, there tends to be this huge spike in interest in cybersecurity. I've seen whole security teams built from zero to hundreds of people over things like this. And so I think the takeaway there is to be a little bit more proactive, to know that, while this may not happen to you, it can happen to you. And being prepared is going to be far less expensive and far less damaging to get ahead of it. And so just realizing that these threats are out there, and being proactive is going to definitely give you a return on investment, whether you see it or not.
Yeah, I love that. Well, this is a great segue into some of the real conversations that you've had, Jake. And, can you talk to me about one that's top of mind for you right now, that, like, if you had one story to share, what would that be?
Well, the majority of the conversations that I have with customers are really around, they're still, there's the biggest problem that they're having is cultural and with people, and the technology itself. I mean, I would say maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, it was kind of a question like, what's the best way to implement cloud, for example. But I think at this point we have so many great, references and customers that are willing to talk about their journey, that the actual execution side, while there are still like legitimate questions and decisions that need to be made, I think the best practices have been pretty well established at this point. So it's really about getting your team, your people, your employees to embrace the change, the new technology that you're rolling out within your organization, cloud, AI, ML, all of these things, data science, that are really important to organizations of any size, getting them to kind of, especially the older employees, the ones that have been around for a while, the ones that have invested their career in kind of legacy technology, to get them to come around and want to learn these new things and be enthusiastic about learning these new things. And again, what I've seen is it's usually a lot of resistance and then an aha moment and then enthusiasm. I very rarely come across folks who are kind of like ambivalent about cloud, for example. They're either kind of, and there's fewer and fewer that are against it, that the tide has changed. And more people who are enthusiastic about it. So then it becomes a matter of upskilling. And I have a mantra that I repeat over and over again, but I'll just say it again, like the success of your cloud adoption within your organization is going to be directly proportional to the motivation, the skill, and the opportunity that you give your employees to use that skill within your organization. And if you just focus on getting buy-in from your employees and you focus on getting them skilled as quickly as possible after they're bought in, they're going to solve the rest of the problems for you. So I know that's not like a single story, but it's kind of like, over hundreds of stories. Yeah, that's basically the theme, the major theme with the conversations I'm having with customers.
That's great. And I'm hearing a couple things going back to our earlier conversation of how do we bring this back to best practices from one of the most safest forms of transportation. I'm hearing this command component, having somebody who is ready to take the charge to get the team rallied and excited. Somebody needs to take that lead to start that motivation piece, right?
Absolutely.
And then the skill, right? We talked about practice. So there's, skill and opportunities, right? Practicing with cloud technology, AI, ML, all of those things, and really getting your hands in there to a point where you have those little tests along the way to build your confidence and to build your capabilities would lean into that really well as also. So I think those are fantastic. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you was, do you have any good examples of other ways that you, like either specific skills building or training that you've seen work in those conversations as those customers are sort of going through that arc of motivation, aha moment, and then really starting to get their hands wrapped around that?
Definitely. Yeah. So again, first, get buy-in first, because if people are not seeing what's in it for them and they don't understand the reasons why they're being asked to learn these things, then, they'll smile and nod, and then, you send them training and they'll treat it as a paid vacation. They need the training, going into training, they need to be motivated. They need to be tied to a big goal that they want to accomplish. And then they have to be able to put that into practice as soon as possible. And I would even say if you could put it in practice at the same time while they're doing training, I know it's a lot to ask of employees, but if they're fully bought in my experience, you can get that kind of buy-in, you can get that kind of commitment. And that was my personal experience having gone through this. I was able to get my team on board when I was a customer of AWS, and I was able to, I come in the office on the weekend and I'd see them there on the weekend, just trying things. And, it's funny, we were talking about flight simulators earlier. The cloud is like the ultimate flight simulator, for IT, because you can replicate production environments into sandboxes and just try things and find out if they work or not. When I was coming up, a couple of decades ago, we didn't have the cloud. We didn't have things like that. If you wanted to practice, we practiced in production for the most part, which wasn't a very safe way to do it. Right?
Okay, not a good practice. Don't do that.
Yeah. So now we can really minimize the cost of failure to a degree to where it's a rounding error if it's just invisible. So take advantage of it. The cloud allows you to practice. So I believe in equal parts, theory and equal parts practice. So like take the training, watch videos, read, there's so much information out there. That's another thing that we have today. Back in the day, I remember even for a text editor to have the manual, the printed manual in like a Sun Solaris machine for VI, it was like this huge manual and only like a few people in the world had it. So it was like this tribal knowledge just how to use a text editor. But nowadays, you could go on YouTube, you could ask ChatGPT, you could watch AWS training and certification, free videos on AWS channel. You could take the actual training. There's so many ways to learn this stuff. And then you could just open a AWS account if your company doesn't have one with a credit card and have a free tier and for free practice these skills. and it's identical to what you would be doing at a large company in a production environment. So we've never had it this good. I just think that people are kind of become blind to it because it's just the new normal, but it's really such a tremendous opportunity. No matter who you are, if you want to learn this, you can learn this. You can become one of the best in the world. All you have to do is do it.
Yeah, I agree. I think those are some great suggestions. And I'm actually going to work the other way and ask Damani, with so many options now and so much information being so accessible, what are the top two things you've found to help you and your team to do those like hands-on skilling, immersive, or things that you've recommended to clients to help them with that skill part of the conversation we're having right now?
Yeah, very similar thing. You know, our customers are like, hey, we need to do a DR exercise, or we need to do a data discovery exercise and see what we can find. Tell them, go start up an AWS account that's empty, right? That's your playground. And, take our products and apply it to that account. You can contain the environment. You can make sure the information in there isn't sensitive or secret to your environment, right? It's stuff that if something happens, you don't really care about it. And it's a great playground, a great temporary environment to play in. Also for Rubrik ourselves, we have a set of pre-created labs where you can just walk through how the Rubrik Security Cloud works, how it works in AWS. You can spin up different types of workloads and do your direct protection or discovery on those workloads in those practice environments. And then the other thing you're doing while you're practicing, right, is you're building those checklists and you're building those procedures, and you're using that opportunity to get that run book or get that checklist that you're going to want later on if you do have a real event within your environment. So, awesome. We have not had it better than we do today. You used to test in production. I used to ask my company to buy test environments for me. And I need a scaled down of what production looks like so that I can go test stuff over there. And that was a huge expense to a company and, difficult to justify. But now it's like swipe your credit card, spin this thing up for, a week or 2 weeks, a month, whatever it takes. You pay as you go, shut it down, and, you're good to go.
Yeah, that's great. Looking at some of sort of cataloging the couple things that you guys just mentioned, free AWS environments, getting a pre-created lab, these resources that you have available, going back to the pilot analogy, you always know what you have and how you're going to use it. And so I'll just sort of abstract what you guys just said as one very simple practical thing for the audience to take away today is check out the sites, call a rep, find out what you have available to get that playground started for you to get your hands on that with that specific mission. I think that's a really, really awesome takeaway. And then transitioning into the next part of what we wanted to talk about. So you've got this playground with the world is better than it's been, but you also really have to think about the framework in which you approach and think about cloud and data security. Damani, I'd love for you to start talking us through what zero trust data security is and some of the things that are top of mind for you with respect to cloud and data security specifically today.
Yeah, so the first part is kind of right there in the name, zero trust, right? You trust no one to start with, right? And then you build from there. So you need to make sure that either users or operators that are going to interact with your data or your environment are authenticated and using a strong authentication method, right? Not just a simple password, but you're going to want to have MFA applied, maybe some sort of tokening system. But you really want to make sure that the user that you think is accessing your data is the actual user that's accessing your data. Next in line, at least from a Rubrik perspective, is we also want to make sure that data is protected, right? So we have implemented policies and procedures and using a product like Rubrik Security Cloud to make sure that we have a secondary copy of your data and that those secondary copies are secured. Maybe we're using an air gap solution where the users that primarily access that data have no access to the data protection platform. And the access to that secondary copy is not electronically discoverable. So hackers and malicious software can't go find that second copy. We want to make sure you have an immutable copy of your data. It can't be changed once it's been protected. A lot of the attacks that we see the first thing they come after is the backup copy or the data protection copy. So we're either going to try to get into the backup software and change its policies and make it delete its own data, or if it's sitting on like a NAS share or something that's been exposed, we'll just go in and encrypt that data ourselves. Now you have no backups, and now we can go play around with your production environment, extract whatever data we want and encrypt it. And then that's how customers get into trouble to begin with. So it's, again, starting with that, hey, we don't trust anyone. Now we trust the folks who are authorized. And then the last part of it is, once that data is protected, if we provide this capability of finding where that sensitive data is. Because a lot of times the question we get from our customers is, yeah, we know we've got sensitive data, but we don't know exactly where it is. We don't know what our different developers have done, where they've put that data. So we provide that capability of finding where it is, reporting it, and allowing users to take action.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to unpack with what you just said. And I think the thing is, you could read pages and pages about zero trust, but I want to reiterate the first point you said, which is it's in the name, right? So sometimes the scope and then some of the other publications and governance around zero trust, like the NIST standards and things like that. I mean, you could literally read thousands of pages of information about it, right? But if you were to just start with something simple and a takeaway, zero trust, do not trust anybody, right? And then going around to the different layers within your organization, within the different places where data may live, and then continuing to piece that together. This is the beginning. This is how you start that journey. Would you agree, Damani?
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. And then to your point also, like there are different tools like what Rubrik offers to help you with other elements of that, right? Some of these tangents around sensitive data, for example. I thought that was a great example. And so there are layers within there about how you have to consider how you handle the data. So taking it up and out to the infrastructure side, whenever we're having data security conversations, we also want to be having that same conversation with our AWS counterparts. And Jake, I'd love for you to talk to us about security in the cloud and what's top of mind for you there.
Yeah. So the thing about security in the cloud is, there's kind of like I was talking about before. This is even more true with security folks, although I'd say today we're in a pretty good place. But, in the past, there have been a lot of CISOs and security folks that have been kind of skeptical about the cloud. And I think it came from just kind of ignorance of just what it is, right? It just this perception that we're just putting our data on the internet and that sort of thing. But as they learn more, I mean, I always say that education is the best marketing when it comes to cloud and probably to almost anything. But just for a service that you really believe in that has a lot of benefits, education is really the key. And so the more they learn about it, the more, again, there's almost no neutral. They go from kind of skepticism to to real enthusiasm. Once they realize kind of the controls that are in place, we have that shared responsibility model, which we're going to talk about in a minute. That's super helpful. But what that essentially does, it allows you to kind of focus on the things that you're responsible for and kind of concentrate your efforts on that. And so what ends up happening is, even if you keep your team kind of the same size, your security team the same size, they're able to be more effective because they need to focus on fewer things. And on top of that, they have more tools and best of breed tools available to them in order to kind of manage that security. When it comes to compliance, I think it makes it just almost a no-brainer. I mean, when I was a customer, I remember having to answer questions from internal audit teams that they would pass on to external audit teams. And there was this whole thing where, you have to write things up, and it was a lot of overhead. When we moved to AWS, we just had these kind of letters from AWS stating kind of the security controls that they have in their data centers. And we were able to pass those along to the compliance folks. And it was just like, it was almost kind of like revenge for them creating all that work for me in the past, because now they got to read through all these things. There's like more information that they can possibly ever need. And so it just made my job so much easier. And the same for my counterparts in the security organization. It just really from a compliance standpoint, it's really just, it's a game changer, and for security as well.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think through all of this, you have to have both these things that light up the team, some kind of a hook that gets them excited. And then also the simplicity is going to help across the board, right? And
Yeah.
this is a commonality that AWS and Rubrik share from a user perspective, and also from a leadership perspective to help get teams, fully participating, because this is a really important topic, right? So we don't want to have any barriers to help them get going with that. And I
Yeah.
would love for you to talk to us about the shared responsibility model.
Yeah, and just one last point on that last one, that I forgot to mention is the fact that once you're in AWS, you have access to our partner solutions. Rubrik being a premier one of those, and it's very easy to kind of onboard solutions like that once you're in the cloud. And Rubrik's in AWS, and it works very seamlessly. So on top of all the controls that you get from AWS, you also have our third-party partner controls that are very, very easy to consume and access compared to when you were in the data center. We look at the shared responsibility model. This is a very important concept for customers to understand. Essentially, you take a look at all of the different layers of what you need to worry about from a security standpoint, but also from all the other pillars, performance, reliability, resiliency, all those other things. And you kind of draw a line down the middle and you see kind of everything below that line AWS is responsible for. So this is security, of the cloud. And then, security in the cloud, the things above that line are the customer's responsibility. So AWS manages and controls the components from the host operating system, virtualization layer, the physical security of the facilities in which the services operate. And AWS customers are responsible for building the secure applications. We provide a wide variety of best practice documents, encryption tools, and other guidance that customers can leverage in developing their application level security measures. But really the point here is that, if you look at when you were in the data center, you had to, as a security organization, as a customer, you had to worry about all of these things. And you had whatever tools you just happened to purchase and be able to afford to do those things. So you had inferior tools and you had a lot to worry about. The great thing about this model is you can concentrate just on those things at the top. So you can concentrate your efforts on those things, that you're responsible for, and you get all of those great tools that come with AWS. And, security is always our top priority. So we're always coming out with more controls and more tools for security teams and cloud teams to consume to make their lives easier. And another great thing about being in the cloud is, and this is just such a simple concept, and I think we need to talk about it more, is you're not going to be able to secure what you don't know about. So just having that observability that the cloud offers allows you to, the classic example is, a developer puts a PC under their desk and is running a production workload on it, and the CIO doesn't know about it, right? That's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to do in the cloud because it's just so easy to see what you have, and therefore you're able to control it and secure it.
Yeah, I love that. And, Damani, I'd love for you to help string these two things together because we certainly spend quite a bit of time on this on the Rubrik side of marrying this shared responsibility model concept. And this is true for any cloud vendor and software provider, right? Any SaaS provider, you are, as a customer, responsible for the data. And so thinking about that, things that you're using in combination with Zero Trust, do you have something that you typically talk to customers about to loop those two ideas together, Damani?
Yeah, it's just sort of reiterating on Jake's point, right? The cloud vendors, AWS included, we're going to make sure that the servers are up, that there's enough capacity to do the work that you need to do. They're going to give you the tools to make sure that you, the end user or the customer, can make sure the right people are getting into the environment. That you have a place to put your data, but they're not responsible for making sure that a second copy of your data has been made or where you've placed the data, right? That's still up to the customer to do. And that's where Rubrik comes in and helps out and to say, hey, we know that we have, a backup copy or a secondary copy of our data. We know we can take a look at that secondary copy and see where we have sensitive data, making sure that it's in the right place. It's not in a place that it shouldn't be. Those are the things that you need extra tools or extra things to take care of, because again, AWS is making sure that core infrastructure and the walls are there, but what you put into the house, if you want to use that kind of analogy, is really up to you and how you protect the things inside of that house or your environment. So.
Yeah, I like that. And, going back to, again, some of the pilot analogies that we were talking about earlier, bringing it into here, something else that I'm hearing as we're going through this discussion, we talked about the importance of a checklist and repeating and going through that and having the diligence to look at that. And one of the things that updated modern technology, such as AWS and Rubrik together, allows you is that observability piece that Jake brought up, which is now I can see what the landscape is. And then through Rubrik, being able to actually have the observability on the data, on the asset, to know what the checklist should be. Are you also looking at it that way, Damani? And how would you extend that analogy with your pilot experience?
Yeah, so the pilot analogy would be, we don't build the plane necessarily, but we're going to operate it, and we're going to make sure that people are able to get on safely, they're able to get off safely, they're going to get to their destination in a safe manner. So, with respect to IT and the observability of the data and the protection of that data, and making sure that the right policies are implemented across the board. These are the checklist items, if you will, that we would have. So, hey, do we have a backup of XYZ application that we just saw come online? Do we have an automated way to protect it? So even if somebody in the environment forgets to turn on that protection, the product will do it for you. Do we have an automated way of observing the data? We see this new set of data pop up in the environment. Can we discover it automatically? And can we go and start reporting on it and taking action in some cases on, is this data in the right place? Is it where it should be? So providing those tools and those capabilities is what we're really all about.
That's great. Thanks for that. So this, again, just moving along here into our next topic. Jake, I'm going to go ahead and have you talk about this here.
Yeah, so what this eye chart represents is just some of the security certifications or compliance certifications that we offer. I would have given you the complete one, but you wouldn't be able to see it. But this is just an example, right? And the point is that security at AWS is always going to be our top priority. It always has been and always will be. And, the reasons for that are obvious. Like we have to have a perfect record in order to maintain trust with our customers, right? And so we take it very, very seriously. And we architected, AWS to be the most flexible, secure cloud environment available today. And, that's evidenced by the fact that it's able to satisfy the security requirements for military, global banks, and many other high sensitivity organizations. And the great thing about that is, you don't have to be one of those high sensitivity organizations to take advantage of all of those security and compliance controls. You, as a regular customer, you get access to those. And we use the same hardware and software to build and operate each of our regions, regardless of who the customers are. And so, our service offerings and our supply chains, they're vetted and accepted to be secure enough for top secret workloads. And all of our customers get to benefit from that. So all of this is backed by a deep set of cloud security tools. And this is a moving target, so I hope we get the numbers right, but it's over 300 security and compliance services and features, and 98 security standards and compliance certifications, which is more than any other offering. And this helps satisfy compliance requirements for virtually every regulatory agency around the globe. So you could be sure, no matter whether you're a startup or an enterprise or a government entity, you gain access to all of these things.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. It's impressive. There's no other words other than, like you said, go check it out. All right. So final couple notes here. Without a doubt, the practice, the attention to detail, and the assigned responsibilities and communication from the pilot analogies are so important and applicable to our cloud data security conversation here today. Damani, what would you add around two things, let's say at least, that you would say you want everybody listening here today to take away to their desks, to their team around consistency?
Yeah. So, what does consistency really mean in an IT perspective? Like for a pilot, it means we do the same thing the same way every time. So we take an action and we know what the expected result is. And if we get something back different, we know that we need to, go address that. But we are expecting, and you see this a lot in ATC communications or air traffic communication. I say, I want to do a thing. I'm expecting them to come back and say either yes or no, you can do that or you can't. You can do it in this particular way. If they come back and say something that's totally off from that, they start talking about, instead of landing at an airport, hey, you're going to need to go to a different destination or change your altitude or something else. That raises a flag in your mind. Hey, I need to go and address that. So if in your environment you do things in a consistent manner, from an IT perspective, making sure you have consistent policies, making sure that you have consistent access rights across the board. It's much easier to see those exceptions pop up of, hey, why are you, operating in this part of the environment when you really shouldn't be, based on our policy or based on the set of consistent rules that we set across the board. Similar thing from a data protection perspective. We want to make sure all of our data is protected in the same way, that we're observing our data in the same way. And we want a policy engine that's going to allow us to do that across the board, not just maybe for, using AWS, not for just our EC2 instances or our virtual machines, but also in our database environment, our RDS environment, or maybe in our S3 environment. So the tooling that we're using, we want to make sure that that's providing you that consistent policy experience across the board.
Those are great. Nothing's left off the table there. It's like, just be diligent, keep up with it, be consistent. Jake, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I would just say that, again, I probably sound like a cloud evangelist. Maybe I am. But, the thing is, I've been in IT a long time, my entire career. And consistency was always something that we struggled with. Consistency between environments, consistency between primary and disaster recovery environments. These are just headaches that IT folks have had to deal with, since the beginning of IT. And it wasn't until the last few years when, cloud adoption is really kind of ramped up in the enterprise that these problems are almost like non-problems now. You could just replicate a server very easily. And it's like having a Xerox copy of it. You could do that with an entire environment. So going from, development to, testing environments to production environments to DR environments, they could be replicated and automated. That replication could be automated. And you can have complete confidence that it's going to be an exact copy. And this is just a superpower that we've never had before. So take advantage of it. This is, and people are just starting in IT right now. Be thankful for that you have this technology now, because, in the old days, and I probably sound like a real old person at this point, but in the old days, this was hard. This was a really hard thing to do, and if not impossible, to get consistency across environments. And now it's like something we don't even think about because it's so easy.
Yeah. And
I love that.
To sort of add on to that, we want a consistency not just within one environment, one AWS account, but we want it across all of those accounts. We also want it across our on-prem environments, even if we're using different hypervisors. So again, the tooling that you're looking at, or the policies you're looking to put in place, you want to make sure that those can be applied to every different environment, as well as different account that you may have within that environment.
Yeah, again, going back to those key principles, if you are using your checklist, if you have the team on board, they've been properly skilled, we know who's in charge of what, there are clear lines of definition, and then you apply these zero trust principles, you apply these cloud security principles, the layers of that onion will become more clear about how some of these specific examples that Jake and Damani have given actually apply to your business and your landscape. Fantastic discussion today. I do want to go ahead and point everyone who's listening to some of the resources that we have available in the handouts. Make sure that you check that out. We've got our Zero Lab report. There's different details on events that we have coming up, Partner EcoCast, an AWS Immersion Day. And then also, if you'd like to schedule a meeting, we have a Rubrik and AWS slam dunk for cybersecurity. So book a meeting and we'll send you a $100 gift card. Jake and Damani, thank you so much for your time today. Loved the discussion. I learned a few things as well, and I hope everyone else has a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so great presentation. I enjoyed that a whole heck of a lot. One of the reasons, they don't know this, the presenters today, but I am also a private pilot. I don't have the kind of experience that Damani and Jake have, but I do love flying, so I could really relate to the metaphors there. That was a lot of fun for someone like me. So what you can see up there now is a poll question that we have for you. And the poll question is pretty simple. How prepared do you feel in the event of a cyber attack, and also including ransomware, the first response there? So how prepared do you feel in the event of a cyber attack? Damani, are you there?
Yes, I am.
All right. So the poll question here is interesting. I think it seems like a lot of people are probably like to think they're prepared, but then when it comes right down to it, often they find that when it actually occurs, they weren't as prepared as they think. Is that something you find?
Yeah, we do run into that with our customers a bit. Some do have plans in place for a ransomware attack. I think in this day and age, everybody's aware that these are things that are happening to customers, and even the ones who believe they're prepared. Sometimes they haven't had like an independent audit or somebody else take a second look at what they've done, and they do find out the hard way that they're not as prepared as they thought they might be. But even just having looked at your environment, done some research around ransomware, can improve your security posture quite a bit, because you'll look around and see what other people are doing, what the threat vectors are, and then be able to address those within your environment.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're seeing some interesting results from the poll here, and it's clear from what I can see, that there is definitely more work that a lot of organizations have to do. So that's some interesting feedback. You can see some of those results there. Just a quickie poll to kind of get the pulse of the of the audience there. So good to see how that we're getting some honest answers, I think. So now, Damani, let's get to some questions if you're ready.
Sure.
So here's an interesting one. In the case of a ransomware event, how does Rubrik ensure that you're not restoring the ransomware only to get encrypted again? That's obviously a common complaint from companies who've been attacked, and they've been attacked and reattacked more than once, more than twice often. So what does Rubrik do to ensure the integrity of data in that situation?
Yeah, for sure. That can definitely be a problem. The knee-jerk reaction is, hey, let's shut everything down. Let's restore back to maybe last night's backup or a night ago. But really, how do you know when that infection came into your environment? How do you know that if you recover back to a specific backup, that you won't just reinfect yourself because that infection, either the data is already encrypted in that, or the malware that caused the encryption is in that backup. So Rubrik specifically, we do a couple things. We can detect, ransomware within the backups themselves. So we look at the indicators of compromise. We look at the entropy of the data to see if things have already been encrypted. We're searching for known malware applications within the actual backup data itself. So not the live systems, but the data that we've taken a backup of. And then we have we provide a capability to identify what a safe place to restore is. Here is where we don't see indicators of compromise, or here's where we don't see any previously encrypted data. So this should be a good recovery point for you. We still recommend recovering to a clean room, for example. So putting that data back, testing it again in that clean room type environment, so that you can be sure that there's no other bad information within the data. But we do have it built in to detect ransomware, to detect the effects of ransomware, and be able to provide you with a safe recovery point.
Got it. Yeah, that is really important stuff. One thing that is on everybody's mind these days is artificial intelligence, chat GPT, things like that. What's your opinion, Damani, on how that is affecting security industry-wide these days? We've seen better phishing attempts, for example, than we've seen in the past, very professional looking via things like ChatGPT. What is the impact going to be going forward, do you think?
Yeah, so it's can the humans outsmart the computers, right? So I'm sure we'll see an uptick in additional attacks. There's not just like the chat GPT, for example. There's organizations that are offering ransomware as a service. So the ransomware actor doesn't even have to really know much about how to create an attack. They can go to this type of service and just say, hey, here's who I want to target. You go and do a ransomware attack for me based on the technology and things that service has developed. So it's getting more sophisticated. It's getting easier to do a ransomware attack. So we're certainly going to see more and more of these types of events, and companies have to take the steps to protect themselves.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And ransomware is still top of mind for so many companies. In fact, as you know, we're seeing the rise of actually, in some instances, less encryption being used and more the threat of releasing the data that they have compromised, for another ransom called double extortion, even triple extortion. So this is something that seems like it's only, getting worse and worse, doesn't it?
Yep, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So related to that, how big a threat does social engineering still pose for companies when it comes to security these days? You would think people know about phishing attacks, although we've just, shown how they're getting more sophisticated. But is social engineering, are these attempts still something that hackers are doing a lot? Do they still find it a valuable avenue for attacks?
100%. I mean, that's one of the number one ways that they get in, right? Is they need to have some bit of information about your environment, and the easiest or most common way to get that is through the people who work in that environment. So, the attackers are still doing social engineering type attacks. They're still doing the phishing emails and all the other things that we see to try to get somebody that has the knowledge, or get to somebody who has the knowledge about how the environment works, and allow them to gain access.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I've got time for one more question before we start wrapping this up, and we really appreciate your time today. So you had a slide on the shared security model. Now, do you still find, or commonly find, that customers tend to think that the platform provider security is all they need? In other words, if I'm on, AWS, will AWS protect all of my stuff? Is this an attitude that you still see commonly among companies?
It's not as common now. I think the education has been getting more and more out there that AWS or any of the hyperscalers really are providing the infrastructure and the security of that infrastructure, but not securing the data. How the data is protected, how the data itself is secured, is still up to the customer, and that's what the shared security model is really trying to say. So occasionally we do still run into it. Hey, we think that we should be fine. We're in the cloud and the cloud is secure. But that messaging has been going on for a number of years now, and I think most people, as they start their cloud journey, are being educated about it kind of right away.
That's good to hear. I like kind of ending on a positive note to know that, hey, you're responsible for your own stuff here. It's not on the cloud provider, to do it all. So keep that in mind. So I think we're out of time right now. I want to thank you, Damani, as well as Natasha and Jake for putting together a fabulous presentation and for all the insights in the Q&A. Really informative, and I learned a lot, and that's always a good thing. Really appreciate everything you have presented us with, and look forward to more discussions in the future. But now, before we wrap up, we have one more piece of business, and it's the giveaway of the pair of Beats Studio wireless headphones. Remember that to be a winner, you do need to be present for the entire event. So do the drum roll in your head if you want. And the winner is Corey Hopwood from Tennessee. Congratulations, Corey. We'll be in touch to get you your headphones. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Rubrik and Amazon Web Services for making this event possible. It was a real delight to have you on today. And thanks as always for attending and for your great questions. That concludes today's event. Have a great rest of your day.